The watch community and the hypebeast community share two contrasting opinions on Richard Mille watches. The watch community infamously dislikes them. They are, I think, the second most hated watch brand, but the hypebeast community loves these watches. Now, the RM brand has grown due to their significance in marketing, particularly in extreme sports such as Formula One. But all the watches are sort of similarly designed, they're all kind of skeletonized, they follow the same general aesthetic, and they're very easily recognizable. So now, a few years on, why is the RM brand the second most disliked watch brand, at least when it comes to watch enthusiasts? So in this video, I'm going to share my thoughts on this subject and give you hands-on impressions of this particular watch. This is the RM11-03 flyback chronograph, and this is in titanium. A big thanks to Ken Watches, they're a watch dealer in Hong Kong, and they're the ones that own this watch, and they let me come and film this, so check them out if you're in the market for something really cool. So let's start off with the hands-on impression of this watch, and then we'll transition into why exactly RM is the second most hated watch brand. So what are the case dimensions then? So the case diameter is 44.5 millimeters, basically 45. Lug to lug, it's 50 millimeters. Thickness, 16.5. Now this is quite important because it's really what makes the watch large on the wrist. It's not so much just the lug to lug or the case diameter. The thickness plays a huge role into this. Now the movement the watch carries is the RM AC3. It's got a power reserve of 55 hours. It's 4 Hertz. It's a skeletonized flyback chronograph with an oversized date and variable rotor geometry. That's interesting. The material of this case construction and a lot of the movement is also titanium, grade 5 titanium when it comes to the movement. I'm not sure about the case. The features the watch has is a flyback chronograph, and like all other RMs, they have a real sports focus, so the watch is resistant to high G-forces. That means that the movement is quite rigid. And the watch also has a free sprung balance. So what are aspects of the dimensions that I like and dislike? I really like the case geometry and the tonneau style. This is a tripartite case, so essentially it's like a sandwich construction, and it looks really cool. It looks pretty industrial. I think the overall dimensions of this watch could have been slightly reduced. It would have been a lot nicer had it been maybe just 1 or 2 millimeters smaller in terms of lug to lug particularly, and maybe a 43 millimeter case diameter. Now the thickness of this watch, that's the main thing I would like reduced from 16.15 millimeters down to perhaps 12, 13. That would be rather nice, and it would also not look so beastly on the wrist. And this watch is impossible to wear with any sort of sleeve, so you can just forget about that altogether. Now a little bit about the dial. The dial is quite a lot to take in. Nowadays this isn't that special looking, because I think enough watch companies have taken on this design language, and we have become fatigued to a lot of these skeletonized watches. The hands to me are actually some of the most mediocre looking hands in a watch. I really could not tell that these hands didn't come out of a $15 RM homage from Amazon, and that's quite sad. The chrono design is quite nice despite not being super legible. But that's not the point of this watch. Yeah, it's not so much the functionality, it's just the design really. I also really appreciate the font RM uses in their date and other markers. Now, a bit about the case. The case on RMs is really what makes the watch and what signifies the watch to be distinctly RM. This sandwich style tripartite construction gives it a very distinctive presence on the wrist. This is particularly noticeable because the side flanks of the case are so thick, 16 millimeters in total, so side flanks at least 10. Another distinctive feature is how the entire watch is curved, and it sits curved above the contour of your wrist. The watch is so large, I guess it needs to be curved. But the thing is, when you have such a curved watch and the movement is not curved, then you actually waste a lot of space, and now I kind of understand why the watch is so thick, because the movement and the dial are essentially kind of floating in between this curved surface. So you have so much extra space up and below. The curved sapphire crystal, another part of the curved case construction, it's absolutely magnificent and glorious looking. I particularly like the use of the heavy AR coating. It's done really well. You see that blue hue. It's quite cool to look at. But with this sort of large curvature, that is very much warranted, because you would not be able to see anything thanks to the dome and viewing angles had it not been AR coated. So the movement. RM makes their movements look so deadly. I love their industrial and sharp edged style design, just like car parts. Well, they say it's based on Formula One parts, and you really do see that. It's just finished way cooler than a Formula One engine would be finished, but this is so much more aesthetically pleasing, and I really like the way they've done it. It feels very precise and not necessarily luxurious, which is a funny juxtaposition because these watches cost more than your well-spec'd S-Class, so it's still cool though. I would say they're the most luxurious watches in the world, but they don't look it at all, and they're just sport and kind of utility focused. You really see the emphasis of lightweight automotive design in all aspects of the watch, except for the size of it. And that's particularly clear with respect to the skeletonization of the movement and the dial. There's no engine bay cover or any excess sound deadening or any sort of non-essential thing here. So now, why does the watch community express distaste towards RM? Why is it the second most hated watch brand? And why aren't so many people talking about them? Here are my thoughts. This is some ideas I've come up with, so feel free to share yours also in the comment section. This is no definitive analysis. So first of all, the brand isn't that old. They're just a bit over 20 years old. And with that, naturally, there is no heritage to rely upon. So there isn't that sense of luxury that comes with something that's been refined over generations and generations and centuries. That is not there. This is very much a new kind of brand, and it costs so much more than all the other watches that had been refined over centuries. Secondly, the brand is fashion focused. Advertising the watches towards the masses results in the appreciation of the fashion focused symbolism of the watch. Not everybody is a watch enthusiast, and you can't expect everyone to be one, but you can expect everyone to appreciate good design and fashion. And that is the case with RM. It's marketing, but we know that, and they market heavily in Formula One, and the viewers of Formula One are not essentially just automotive enthusiasts. It's the huge general public as well. Third reason ties into the second, which is people know them for their marketing in extreme sports like F1. Without this RM F1 connection, I don't think the brand would be half what they are. But the thing is, watches and extreme sports are so out of touch. It seems so redundant. A watch is really redundant in the use case of an extreme sport. No one really needs one or uses one. It's just sort of a hindrance, really. It's not something that anyone relates to. Fourthly, the watches are stupendously expensive. They really feel toy-like. They are so light. They are designed to be light, but that doesn't matter. They just feel toy-like, and to ask so much for what is perceived as so little makes no sense whatsoever. The watches really do feel cheap because a lot of them are made out of carbon fiber, and that really just feels like a plastic in the hand. It feels like a cheap plastic, and it even looks like a cheap plastic in some cases. You really have to have a deep appreciation for carbon fiber, how it's made, how it's woven, and the minutiae of these things to appreciate something so similar to plastic on the wrist. Now, this particular watch is a titanium watch, and titanium is still light, but because the watch is so large and it has plenty of glass, it doesn't feel light. You really feel the presence of it on your wrist. Now, fifthly, their sales strategy and manufacturer scarcity, coupled with hiking watch prices by over 50% for no other reason than just because they can, makes it very undesirable. Even Vacheron has watches that are similarly priced to Rolex. RM seems to start at a well-spec'd Mercedes S-Class, well over $100,000. That's kind of where they start at, and all the watches are so similar, it just doesn't make sense. And the last reason is the number of fakes and homages that are so close to the real thing, even in terms of how they feel, because they're all very light, toy-like things in a hand. These watches literally weigh the same, look the same, share very similar characteristics, of course, not in terms of the movement or the design or the uniqueness or any of that, but in terms of just the general aesthetic and shape and lightness. And you can get these for cents on the dollar on Amazon, and a lot of people do buy them just because they think they look cool. it really takes away from any appreciation that you can have for something that looks so similar, that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, just that you have to believe in the engineering being that good. Whereas it does not warrant the price. It doesn't matter how good the engineering is. It is decent engineering. It's not something spectacular. They just found a niche way of presenting it, which is really cool and automotive inspired if you really like that. But there isn't some sort of geniusness that is completely different from all other watches or all other creative watches either. Patek, for example, AP, for example, they can make a watch really feel expensive, luxurious, and make you sort of justify a little bit of the cost. But with this watch and its lightness, it is super hard to see that. And that often leaves watch enthusiasts with a sour taste, particularly when there isn't that much tactile difference between a $20 one on Amazon and the real thing. So those are my thoughts. Leave yours in the comments below. I'll see you in the next vid. Cheers.